Welcome, my friends, back to Beyond the Well, where forgotten histories and untold legends awaken. I never expected to find that well, hidden deep in the woods behind my house. But when I touched its sacred water, I saw more than my own reflection. I saw another world. A world shaped by light and shadow, by heroes and tyrants, by choices that still echo through time. Join me as I uncover the stories of Aldarion that lie beyond the well. The Ballad of Nalen Myrris, Episode 1, A House Divided. The sky cracked with thunder as Nalen Myrris ran for his life. He tore through the underbrush of the Lovakian countryside, boots half-laced and cloak flapping wildly behind him. The forest floor, slick with rain and mud, offered no mercy. He stumbled once, nearly losing the leather satchel clung tight to his chest, but righted himself before his pursuers could close the gap. Branches clawed at his face like the hands of a ghost. He ignored the sting. The only sound louder than his ragged breathing was the pounding of his own heart, a steady drum of panic in his chest. Somewhere behind him, a shout pierced the darkness. They were still coming. In his satchel were 2 precious books, worn and sacred to him. Slung over his back, secured by a braided leather strap, was his beloved loot. He hadn't had time to pack, so he had just grabbed what was most precious to him. He darted left, slipping down a slope, and disappeared into a gully where the trees pressed closer and shadows swallowed light. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, or perhaps it just seemed that way. Suddenly he collapsed against a moss-covered tree, hands trembling. His breath came in great gulps, steam rising in the cold night air. He dared not weep, though the tremor in his chest begged for it. His mother's voice still echoed in his mind. "Run, Nalen, run." 5 years earlier, the scent of lavender and cedar hung in a quiet chamber. The curtains were drawn back to allow the morning light to fall across the bedside. Nalen sat beside it, his hands wrapped around hers, small and bird-like, and warm despite her frailty. Her skin had gone paper-thin, her cheekbones sharp beneath the pallor, but her eyes, still green as spring leaves, watched him with peace. Not resignation, but true peace. "You always had a quiet heart," Anara said, her voice soft. "Even as a boy, you saw more than you ever let on." Nalen couldn't speak. He only nodded, blinking hard. "You must promise me something," she said. "Anything, Mama. When I'm gone, keep playing. Don't let the silence swallow you. There's something in you. I felt it since you were a child, boy. Elian has not forgotten you." Nalen looked down at the floor, ashamed. "I don't feel anything, Mama. I haven't in years." She reached out and cupped his cheek, her hands trembling. "You will. The Nexus stirs for those who serve, not for those who seek power. That is not your path, boy." He shook his head. "There's no path here that I can see. There will be in time, but for now take these." She gestured toward a small chest at the foot of her bed. He opened it carefully. Inside lay 2 books, one bound in weathered blue leather, and the other simple parchment stitched together with cord. "The blue one," she said, "was passed down from me mother, and hers before her. The words of life, Nalen. I have read from it every day since I was a small girl. It is truth, and it is light." Nalen ran his hand along the cover reverently. "The other," she continued, "I copied from an old tome I found in the eastern libraries of Orendal. Writings of a Stoic emperor who believed wisdom was found in reflection. Read them when you are alone. They will comfort you. but in a way you might not first see, but over time will come full circle, and they will steady you. Your father doesn't understand you. He is a stubborn man, has a good heart. It's just buried deep. But I see you, I always have, and you have a gift, not just for music, but for mercy and tenderness. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to her hand. You were born to carry light into the dark, Nalen. She leaned forward and emphasized with her quaking slight frame. You do have a gift. I see it clear as day. You will lift the weary, comfort the burdened. You will be a light you shall see in time as I do. Her voice went soft, and her eyes looked up at the ceilings of the bedchamber. Nalen, promise me you will be that light when all else fails. Nalen choked. I promise, Mama. I promise I will try. I will always be near you, my boy. Her voice trailed off, and she was still, leaving Nalen kneeling beside her bedside, weeping bitterly. In the months that followed Anara's death, Nalen's father had fallen into a bitter and woeful low. All who lived at the estate felt the depression that came from Lord Thorian. The Myrris estate was massive. It had huge resources of wealth, but not just of money, but of old wealth. Of course coin, but more so in land, and especially leadership. Thorian and his fathers before were as tough as they come. For many generations the local looked upon the Myrris estate, and Thorian had been a valiant protector, a warrior, one people feared and loved. But when this larger-than-life figure looked upon his son, he was embarrassed. He had hoped for someone large with brute-like strength, someone who could wield a warhammer and send his enemies running. Nalen had been neither of these. He was small, but had wiry strength. His hands had not been so big as to wield heavy weapons, but they were, in fact, more refined. His mother had seen these qualities and had seized upon them, teaching her son how to play the lute. And while in his youth, when Thorian had been on war campaigns, Nalen learned to connect to the simple beauties of life. The flowers, the forest, the animals that frequented by. And through all this, he had come to love his lute, and his ability flourished. The groundspeople and house servants loved him for it. The joy he brought when playing was unmatched. It was following one of Thorian's long and brutal war campaigns that he had come home to see his son, wearing fine clothes and playing soft music that had ignited his fury. He would not have such a soft and weak son. He had stormed over, ripped the lute from the boy's hand, and crushed it like an eggshell in his massive hands. Horrified, Nalen had run into the forest and vowed he would never return. That is, until his mother had come into the forest and found him, though he didn't understand how. She had coaxed him into coming home, and although Thorian hadn't said anything more on the subject, it had, in some deep and primal way, wounded Nalen. No longer was he the soft little boy that had so easily connected with others through music, but he was quiet after that, reserved, unwilling to put himself out there in any vulnerable way. So it was no surprise that after Anara's death, Thorian's son hadn't been any source of comfort to him, and for months gloom hung over the castle and all who lived therein. Then came Viral Morwin. She arrived draped in veils, all mourning and mystery. A widow, they said, wealthy in her own right, from a family of old coastal lords. Her charm was subtle, but her presence intoxicating. In Lord Thorian's loneliness, he found solace in her attentions. Within months, she was welcomed at court. Within a year, she was mistress of the house. She had come with her son Dareth. Dareth was a large and powerful man. Thorian had been impressed with his brute strength and abilities with a sword. Favor shifted. Nalen had watched it unfold with quiet dread. He tried to ignore the way the servants grew cold around her, or how Dareth always wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes, but something darker brewed beneath the elegance. All the servants saw it. Nalen saw it. There was scheming going on. Forwyth, Lord Thorion's lead servant, had approached him and tried to persuade him to listen to reason, that this woman was poisoning him. Within a week, Forwyth was let go and told not to return to the Myrris estate. And of course, since then, nobody tried to speak reason with the lord of the manor. That is, until one evening, Nalen decided to come to his father in love and concern, to tell him what he was seeing and how it was tearing the family apart. So, in the study, lined with scrolls, he confronted his father. "She is not what she seems, father," Nalen had said, his voice imploring and soft. "I have seen her whispering to the councilmen in the dark. I've overheard talk from the kitchen staff. People are afraid, father." Lord Thorion's eyes burned with a sudden fury. "You speak of my wife? Do not mistake your grief for wisdom. I know what I'm doing." Nalen stepped back, concern and worry filling his eyes as he looked up at his dad. "You can't see what she's doing for me, boy. How could you? Soft and submissive. Ah." He turned away, back towards the fire. Those words, cold and icy from his father's mouth, hit him like a warhammer. "You're blind!" The words escaped before Nalen could catch them. His father swung around, fury now molten. "Enough! Your mother's softness has made you weak. You only see shadows because you're afraid of stepping into the light." Nalen's voice caught in his throat. He stood, fists clenched, heart pounding, but he didn't reply. He left the estate that night. "I'll go for a time," he told the steward. "Perhaps some distance will help." He traveled a few miles to the east and to the north. He played in taverns and markets. He was alone, yet at peace. That is, until the letter came. It was sealed in wax, bearing the crest of his house. The message was brief. "Lord Thorion has fallen ill. Return if you wish to see him one last time." When Nalen arrived, the halls were cold. His father lay in bed, skin sallow, eyes sunken. Lady Morwen sat beside him, reading a passage from some book he did not recognize. When Nalen entered, she smiled thinly and placed a kiss on Thorion's forehead, and then left the room. "Father," Nalen whispered, kneeling. Thorion reached his hand with trembling fingers. "I was wrong. Nalen, I was wrong," he murmured. "But it's too late." "No, father. The fault is mine. I should not have rose in anger." Thorion reached out and gently took his son's hand, and for a moment his gaze was soft and reflective. You are so like your mother. Soft." Then he took in a quick breath. "And yielding." His hand recoiled and he looked away in disgust. Nalen felt the old wound open up, and it was as if a dagger pierced his heart. That night, Thorion died. It shouldn't have come as any surprise as what happened after this. But if anything were to surprise, it would be the speed at which everything happened at the Myrris estate. There was, of course, a rite ceremony for the protector, Thorion, and nobody was seen to weep more than the Lady Morwen. Nalen had been silent and in shock for nearly the entire proceedings, which lent Dareth the opportunity to show and tell others, any who would listen to him, that there was contempt between father and son. And there the seeds of deceit and lies were planted that would eventually pit the entire region against the young heir. The day after Thorion was in his tomb, wagons began showing up. The Morwen clan had arrived. Loud and boisterous they came and took over what had once been a beautiful sanctuary. The servants that had lived at this estate for many, many years, and were in fact more like family than servants, had been removed from their quarters to make room for the Morwens. Those that complained were let go, and those that stayed were treated as less than livestock. Cursed at, abused, pushed around. They tried their best to make what they could of the situation, but it was dire. There was in fact nowhere to go. It came to a head one night when Kalia, one of Nalen's dear friends, the daughter of one of the groundskeepers, stood up to Dareth when he had demanded she meet him in his private chambers. Nalen heard those words, and the hardness that Thorian had always wanted in his son erupted. He stormed down the hall and tore into Dareth. Funny thing was, Dareth didn't fight back. He just glanced around and made sure everyone had heard the words and threats that came from Nalen. Then Dareth had leaned in and whispered so quiet that only Nalen would hear, "Once you're gone, I'll have my way with your little girlfriend. I'll have anything I want, and there will be nothing you can do about it." Nalen raged and pushed him back, but Kalia had grabbed his arm and the two of them left. He spent his next days defending his friends, or rather what he felt were in fact his family, from the onslaught of the Morrowind clan. He of course had more clout as Thorian's son, but as the days went by, he caught the whisperings, the hushed movements, and the dirty looks that the Morrowind sent his way. But it was more than just the newcomers now. He could tell the people in the village would go quiet around him and cast glances over their shoulders. He could sense the apprehension, thick like molasses. Things were changing, and changing fast. Nalen knew something was coming. He felt it in the pit of his stomach. His mind was constantly warning him, and his heart was heavy with grief and pain. That night, he had a dream. He stood in a field of silver grass beneath a golden sky. The air shimmered, and there across the field stood his mother. She wore white. "You must wake," she said urgently. He frowned. "Is this a dream?" Her smile was tinged with sorrow. "Yes and no. Listen to me, Nalen. They're coming for you tonight." "What? Who?" "Dareth and the men he hired. They mean to make it look like an accident." His breath caught in his throat. In his mind, he saw it. The exchange of money, the promise of power, the loyalty that had been building unknown to him ever since the Morrowinds had entered his family's life. "There's no time. Go. Take your light and flee." Her eyes burned into him, and he felt as if every hair on his body was standing straight up. He reached for her, but she vanished like mist. Then he jolted awake, his heart pounding. It was still night. The manor was quiet, too quiet. He moved quickly, shirt, cloak, boots, satchel, books. He glanced at his loot case in the corner. There wasn't much time. He turned to go, but something stopped him. He looked back, then cursed as he ran over and flung the case over his shoulder. He didn't pause to think. He moved through the servant corridors and down through the old stables and out into the orchard where the shadows hid him. He saw a flicker of torchlight pass in the kitchen window. Voices murmured inside. He didn't wait to hear more. He ran, and he didn't stop running until the forest swallowed him. He heard men now shouting in the background and realized they had discovered his escape. He heard horses and saw the distant flicker of a torch. He began to flee, to run faster than ever. Fear came over him, and in desperation he ran faster, faster than he ever had before. The further he got, the more shame and guilt he felt. Running from his own home. A resentment came. A flood of almost every emotion he had ever felt rushed in on him. They had taken everything, his home, his inheritance, even his name. The heavy truth crushed him, and in bitter agony he wept as he ran. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for coming with me beyond the well. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking, following, or subscribing. And if you have a moment, I would love a review. Your feedback truly makes a difference. If you want to dive deeper into the well, visit beyondthewell.net for show notes, transcripts, maps, character descriptions, and much, much more. And until next time, keep seeking, keep dreaming, and keep telling your story. Bye.